Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Conversations with CAUFP, Canadian Association of Urban Financial Professionals. Tonight, we are here with Daniel Constantine, the Executive Financial Consultant with IG Wealth Management. Thank you, Daniel, for joining us. So, again, we are in tumultuous times. And we just thought this is a good time to have a conversation with someone who's actually in the field, an expert, if you will, who gets to kind of see different arenas of investor profiles and investment types, and sometimes maybe a little bit exclusive kind of insight to how movements are happening that perhaps we could just, get a little bit of snippet and insight on what should constituents, just average Canadians, start being mindful of. So we thought we had a few questions prepared for Daniel tonight. To say that we're in economic uncertainty is an understatement. I think it's a statement that is overstated nowadays. So to kind of start us out, what would you say would be the first step someone would take during this current time to maybe walk or march towards the first few steps of wealth?
Yeah. That's a good question. I guess I'd preface it by saying, I think regardless of the times, that you have to sort of approach wealth building in the same way. As a financial planner, I guess we'll kind of ruin it for the audience, but there's no magic. Okay, and I think, for today's conversation, there won't be any sort of groundbreaking or the next stock tip. Don't tune out, but, that's probably not going to be the case. I think you first have to define wealth. And I think for many people, what that answer means can be quite different. But regardless of your position in life, you first have to define it. For those who have worked in, whether it's financial planning or financial advising or wealth consultant, whatever the case may be, your process is normally define your goals, right? Goals and concerns. That's always sort of how you're trained and how you approach things. And over time, you realize that that is the most important aspect of it. Because regardless of who you sit with at various stages of life, you're not able to achieve a goal until you define it. Okay, so whether we think times are tumultuous, whether we think the waters are calm, regardless, I think you have to first define it.
Yeah.
Okay, so whether that definition comes back to a number, whether that definition is a feeling, whether that definition is, you in a place of time or you having the ability to do something, the first thing is just defining what wealth means for you. And I think that then allows you to start, charting the course and, most importantly, work with professionals that can, maybe give you some guidance to get there.
No, I love that. I actually think that's a really good key piece of advice, right? That we get so focused in what's happening in the now. And,
of course.
And I think conversation past, you've heard, CAUFP experts and all of our conversations talk about tuning out the noise. So exactly what you said on knowing what that means to you is so integral to how you kind of see what that looks like for you. So I love that. So a little bit of insight digging, if we will.
Of course.
What trends are you seeing among some of the high net worth individuals in terms of, where they're putting their money? Is there anything that you are seeing from your perspective as a trend?
I'd say yes and no. I think I'd first take a step back and say, when I look at, my clients, and I'm going to date myself here. I've been I've been with IG Wealth Management for over 18 years. It's like 18 years and 8 months. I just checked my LinkedIn recently.
So technically 19.
Almost, we're getting there, right? And when I look at our most, financially successful clients, we can sort of put them in categories, almost define them. We have some that are habitual savers. Like they've just always, been saving every dollar, trying to reduce their expenses and, just always paying attention to how can I maximize my savings. So that's one category. We have many clients who are, financially successful just by taking on that type of habit. We have other clients who have, created great businesses and have either sold those businesses or, they're achieving financial success from the revenue from that business. We have others who have inherited money right? And so obviously that's a reality for many. We also have clients who, they work in, whether it's industries or careers, where it's that ability for them to receive, large bonuses, right? And that also, allows them to get ahead, financially. I think regardless of, where you look, across those spectrums, one of the trends that we're noticing is that financially successful clients are, and I'm only saying this, I guess, because I'm a financial planner, but they're starting to relinquish more control of their money management. Okay, I think there was a time where we felt that, as individuals, we needed to be checking the stock tickers, we needed to be on our trading apps, we needed to be looking for the next NVIDIA, or, looking for where their entry point to get into Tesla is, et cetera. And we notice that as we move up the wealth chain, that our clients are, trying to step away from that more and more, and realizing that the ability to hit these home runs is not what's going to allow them to get to that, financial goal or that financial success that they're looking for.
Yeah.
So they're looking for smart money management. They're looking for someone that's active.
Yeah.
They want to ensure that their portfolios is evolving as the world evolves. Like, you should never be sitting still in that sense. Obviously in times like this, we're going to get calls, should I invest in gold? And, prior to that, should I be getting into cryptocurrency? And prior to that, it was, should I buy real estate in Toronto? And as you just go through the time, you're always going to notice that there's that popular trend or that thing that's being talked about. And you will have that segment of the market that's trying to chase it and trying to get within it. But those who are financially successful, they're the ones who are more moving away from that and realizing that I just need to have a great portfolio managed by qualified and very smart people.
Right.
And if I do that, and I do what I'm supposed to do in terms of, building my wealth and listening to my advisors to save on taxes and making sure that I'm positioning myself in the correct way, then I'm going to get to the next level. And so it's almost simplifying it and employing a team. And I think that's the biggest thing we're seeing from our most successful clients.
So what you're basically saying is still similar to a theme that's I think I'm hearing this year is slow and steady, right? Minding, like weeding out the noise and just understanding, first off, perhaps your I guess this is some type of a definition as well, but in the financial industry is like knowing your style. Yeah. Right? Knowing your investor style, your money management style.
Yeah.
So I think very in tune to a lot of the things that we've talked across our podcast, which is knowing how you spend, knowing how you save money, defining your wealth, to which you had already mentioned. So then the super successful has really just tried to not chase the immediate quick wins.
No, of course.
Right? So
I'd say, I think a lot of times the slow and steady can be almost a turnoff for some individuals because it sounds boring.
Yeah.
And I would agree in some aspects, because it doesn't mean that you're going to achieve low returns on your portfolio and you should just be content with that and you should just continue to save. No, we all have to ensure that we're getting the right rates of return. And, when we come out of, the recent period that we've been, for example, where markets were, they've been on a run for over a decade, in a sense, when we really look at it. Obviously, you've had your particular years. We have our recent downturn here, and we have the 2022 market meltdown. We have, obviously, COVID meltdown. Like, you're going to have those anomalies in the market, but that doesn't mean you're not going to achieve high returns.
Right.
Okay, and the way that you're going to achieve high returns is by having sort of a focus and a system.
Yeah.
So for some of our clients, whether it's saving money on a monthly basis, for some of our clients, it's reducing their tax burden and utilizing tax efficient vehicles or tax efficient accounts. Like, all of that needs to be a part of your plan. In your mind, you need to be slow and steady, and knowing that if I look at my financial wealth or my statements today and I look at it 10 years from now, I'm going to see the direction as to where I'm going.
Yeah.
But I know I'm not going to look at it today and then next quarter or next month and I'm going to see that same, sort of reality. Okay, and I think it's sort of understanding that time is your biggest asset. Outside of that, the income that you earn is your other asset, and if you combine those two, that's how you're going to get to, financial success.
No, I love that, because I think it's always it actually pops up more often than we think until you start stepping away from it. But like the trend is always seemingly like glittery,
Of course.
right? Like eye catching. But I love what you said in terms of like, if I can kind of distill it a little bit, is knowing your style, right? Like knowing how you manage money, right?
Of course.
And then kind of have trusted sources, knowing how to well, again, I think I come back, I can't in good conscience not talk about, but knowing your risk tolerance as well, right? Like to kind of go through the ebbs and flows of time and everything, and but just knowing that it has a good mixture, that you have your financial experts at the table. I highly recommend always talking to a financial advisor, a financial planner to get that really insight on how do you even manage sort of.
Well, it speaks to it because, you need to have great products and great investment management. That's just the core of it. You have to,
Yeah.
right? And I think if your professionals are not providing, what you believe is, whether it's the right product or advice, that you always should be looking for what is, sort of meeting your appetite.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, that puts a lot of responsibility on you because, as an advisor, I can give you the best product, the best ETF or the best pool, the best, individual portfolio. But if you have $100 saved, you can get 20% return. You're not retiring tomorrow. Right. And so the reality is, like, the base of capital that you're utilizing to generate these investment returns is what's going to make the difference. So that puts the onus on the individual to, whether it's save, whether it's reduce your expenses, whether it's reduce your tax, so that they can have as much capital as they can in the markets and growing for them. And so that's where that, teamwork approach comes from, where you have these regular reviews with, advisors like myself, and it's ensuring that we're on track because things change over time. Right. And so you have a job change, you end up getting a bonus, you have, something takes place in terms of a family, and, you happen to come into wealth. It's always having these check-ins with your advisor because as life changes, your plan needs to change along with it. Your risk tolerance can change over time as well. You may be in a position where you can take on more risk because of the stage of life that you're in. And as you progress through that, you may end up backing down, or it may be the reverse, right? So it all depends on, where you are and what your appetite is. And sometimes with more education, you start to become more comfortable with different types of products and different types of investment approaches. And so that's why when you're working, with that advisor, with those professionals, like, you should be educating yourself at the same time, or they should be educating you. And you should feel that, when I first started working with this advisor, I had a very novice level of understanding of, markets and products. But over time, now I'm more in the know. Now I'm more comfortable taking on this equity position because I understand what that means, and I understand we're going to go through the ebbs and flows. But ultimately, over time, this is the, type of investment style that's going to pay off for me, right? So it's sort of, it grows, right, in that sense.
Well, you actually literally just touched on the next thought that we were thinking, like, how do you balance that, right? When clients have, risk tolerance that potentially probably go against their investment profile or what they want. So is there anything that you've seen that you've had conversations around where we can kind of mind the risk?
It's tough. It's tough because, that's where, going back to the first question, is you first have to define wealth and define what that means to you, because then it comes down to math, right? And so if you want to get to a certain place, we have to look at it numerically in terms of what's your saving capacity and what's the underlying rate of return that we're going to need to achieve in order to get to your goal.
Right.
If you're a very conservative investor and just your risk tolerance is extremely low, that may not match with what's required in order for you to get to your goal.
Right.
So are we either going to compromise on the goal, or are we going to compromise on the comfort level?
Right.
And, what we do find, though, is those that work with an advisor, they will, over time, even if it's not immediately, they'll tend to then have a higher appetite for risk because they feel that they're taking educated risk.
Right.
Right? I think when we look at it on our own, it's like, okay, I have this pile of money. This is my life savings. My friends are talking about XYZ ETF or XYZ stock. And, in order to actually pull the trigger to buy that actual investment, it's very challenging. Okay. And that's that, sort of that fear factor. When I'm working with an advisor, it's different,
Right.
right? Because I feel that I have someone on my side who should be, you know, sort of walking me through what it means to take on the appropriate investment risk. And you'll notice that they're more willing to take on more riskier positions. And
Yeah.
I hate using the word, you know, risk. I think it's just more, you know, equity based or more volatile positions, because volatility is not a bad thing, right? Especially when you're at that saving, you know, sort of saving stage of your life and you're buying at different price points. Like, you want volatility, right? You don't want to be, you know, only buying this particular investment when it's shooting the lights out its all-time high.
Right.
If you believe in that company or you believe in that particular fund, like, you'd love to enter at a lower price point as well. So it's understanding that volatility can be on your side, and, you know, being comfortable to take on that level of, you know, volatility within your portfolio. And so there are many times, you know, it just goes back, there are many times where the risk tolerance doesn't match up with the actual goal.
Right.
And I guess that's where you put your coaching hat on as an advisor, right? And now you're that financial coach, and now you're trying to, you know, provide education as to why that may be, you know, the best decision. And if it's not, that's fine too, but we just then have to understand that your goal may be pushed out further in the future, or we may have to reduce the actual goal itself. Right? I think there's, you know, there's nothing wrong with that, right? You just have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think the theme that we're kind of surfacing here time and time again is just how critically, authentically true are we to ourselves about our situation,
Yeah.
and what we really actually want. Is it, you know, is it truly for ourselves even, right? And like defining that wealth in the sense of, are we seeing sort of the social media and keeping up with the Joneses,
Of course.
you know, from the 50s? I don't even know if young people nowadays know that
They have
term.
no idea who you're talking. It's keeping
Oh
up
my
with
goodness.
keeping up with the
The
Carters
Kardashians.
now. Yeah, the
No, wait,
Kardashians.
wait,
it's
who
one
are
of
you gonna
those.
say?
I'll say Carters, Kardashian. Pick one, I guess. But that's I guess
Who's the
more
Carters?
top Jay-Z and Beyonce.
Oh shoot!
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! Sorry,
See?
Beehive. No, I
Edit.
No, but I wasn't gonna call them the Carters.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
I was thinking, oh my goodness, the Currys.
Oh yeah,
That
too.
was the next
you
one.
can pick any of them.
So I think we had some questions on, you know, average Joes
Okay.
now, right?
Yeah.
Like, and I hate even using that kind of like statement, but so we've kind of talked about having that reality check with, okay, you know, if you have $100 in the bank, it's not that you can't do it. That's a great seed fund to know that, hey, you can start putting things away and let's march towards a goal of some type. But how do people really like get started, right? Like, how can they enter a market? Like, I think when times are also unsure, people also want to know, is it ever going to be my time? Right? Have you ever heard your clients come to you like, is it ever going to be me? Like, do I have a chance to get in?
Yeah. Funny enough, that usually comes from the clients who are in the better positions. Is
Okay.
What I find. You know, I think, you know, when I look across the board, the clients who are in the better financial positions and who are on their way to achieving their goals, they are many times the most skeptical and the most obsessive. And, you know, maybe that's what pushes them to be those habitual savers, because they just don't actually believe that they're going to get there.
Yeah.
We love that mentality because it's great,
Yeah.
right? Because those are the ones that will, you know, regardless of what's going on in the markets, they're going to sort of stick to their habits. You know, and if savings are their habits, that's what they're going to do. So when you're talking about that person, you know, starting out, like, just start. Like, there's no good time, you know, to enter the market. Like, whatever we're looking at, you know, today, I think finally, as of today, all the major indexes have ticked positive year to date, except for maybe the NASDAQ might still be down. But, you know, we're looking throughout this year, and we've had a very interesting start to this year, right? I think since March until April felt like that was 6 years on its own, but it was only a month period. And we saw the major indices go completely negative, right? And only as of last week did we kind of get to even. You know, within that same topic, you know, we've just gone through an election, and we've sort of been beaten into Canada's broken and there's so much issues, et cetera, et cetera. And then at the same time, we look at these major markets, and the TSX was the only one that was positive, you know, sort of year to date throughout the majority.
Right.
Okay. And so it comes back to that reality of there's not going to be a good time. And what you think may be happening may not be actually pronounced in the data. Don't try to time the market.
Yeah.
You know, we've had these conversations of, okay, I have this money and I'm going to wait until the better time to buy. And if I knew that, I probably wouldn't be managing your money. I think it's that reality. I think any advisor would tell you that. If I had that kind of crystal ball, I wouldn't spend the time working with others. I would just be doing that on my own.
And a yacht somewhere.
Absolutely, right? Because there is no perfect time. There's just your time. This is your reality and this is now. And so if you're going to get started, now, the type of professional advisor that you can work with, that's going to depend on the, you know, level of assets that you have. That's a reality. That's business. Okay? But nothing stops an individual from getting started in that sense, regardless of what they have. So if we're talking to the younger generation, if that's, you know, obviously cost of living is very high and we're all looking at, man, how do I, you know, even begin to save right now? Right. My rent is taking up 60% of my overall income. Like, what do I even do? Right. And that's for those individuals, we just say, you just have to save. Yeah. I don't care what that amount is, but decide on what that amount is, build that into your budget, treat it as an expense, right? So you have your rent, you have Netflix, you have your savings, and it's just built into your expense level. And as you do that and you do that long enough, now we hope that your income increases. You know, we hope that you're in positions where there is an ability to get bonuses or you're getting sales commissions because of the role that you're in, and just making informed decision as those funds come in. But just get started because there's no time, right? And then, as I said, regardless, you know, working 18 years with clients, we look back and it's like, man, I remember when this person started and their account balance was XYZ, and now, wow, they're one of the larger portfolios that we're managing, and it just happens over time because of just habit.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, at times you can't control life. There's going to be major expenses that come along the way, whether it's because of health, many times it's family. And, you know, you can't allow those to be, you know, inhibitors and just deter you from saving, because you're lucky that you have the ability to do that, right? Because you're saving, you have the ability to help family or help yourself or weather that period where you don't have a job, for example, right? Because if you weren't doing that, then you'd be in that much more trouble. And so that's what I just say to the younger generation. Like, it's not going to be sexy at first. It's not going to be great. You're not going to be looking at, you know, 7-figure portfolio statements. But if you keep going, eventually, you know, you will.
Can I go off script a little bit here?
Of course.
So we see so much financial influencers that has come through, right? Yeah. Like, and what would your kind of advice be? Because, like you said, for the younger generation, maybe it is super sexy to have these like social financial influencers to tell you, here's the mix that I did to go from 10,000 to this portfolio size and all of that. And, you know, I'm a skeptic as well. So, so when I see this, I just, gosh, there's something in my stomach that I just can't, it doesn't sit well with me. I was just wondering from a professional standpoint, like, what are your thoughts when, you know, the younger, you know, I also don't want to just keep saying the younger generation.
Yeah, because it's not just them.
Yeah,
it's absolutely not just them.
But for people who are seeing this, right, and the social influencing around financial portfolio building and all of that, how does someone with your background and your advisory channels and portfolio, like, how would you kind of, what would you say?
Yeah. I would tackle that in a couple different ways. I think, not to be insulting to anyone, but you know, many of the times I do believe that the actual revenue that those individuals are seeing are actually just from the views, right? And so if they're saying, yeah, my portfolio did X, Y, Z, that may not be as much of the reality versus the deposit that they're getting from Instagram or TikTok on a monthly basis because they're getting the views, and that's just the show. Like in finance, many times everything is just a show. And, you know, I wouldn't even pick on this generation because it's just topical now. But those are, you know, by the same token, in the previous generation, those were the gurus that were selling you books or selling you audio tapes, and there was probably no difference there.
Yeah.
You know, they were earning revenue from selling the class versus doing it on their own, and many of the times taking those same dollars and putting it with a professional that's doing all of the fundamentals.
Right.
And so, you know, with everything, though, there are grains of truth in everything. And so you have to understand that some of the things they're saying may be a reality. You know, and it does happen where somebody gets lucky,
right?
You know, and they do purchase a particular investment at a particular time because they came into a sum of money and all of a sudden their net worth has magnified, and it can absolutely happen. But are you really going to sort of hinge your financial future on being that lucky?
Right.
I think that's really becomes the question. But ultimately, if they're getting individuals interested in investing, then that's the good thing.
Okay.
Right? And you may have to understand, though, that your way is not going to be that home run. Right? You're not going to just make that one investment and that's going to carry you to, the promised land. Sometimes you have to learn the hard lesson. There's just that reality too, right? And sometimes it's better to learn that hard lesson when you are younger and the funds aren't as plentiful, and maybe you don't have the family responsibilities and the mortgage payment and et cetera, and maybe you're living at home and now you've lost your savings from your summer job because you listen to this influencer. And I think sometimes even that lesson is what's going to put you in a position to be successful in the future, because you're not going to necessarily
get tricked again.
Absolutely
or fall for
way.
it. Sorry, like maybe I'm not going to call it a trick.
You never know, right? That's what I'd say. You just don't know. But in whether it's weight loss, there's all these things exist where there's always a show, and you always ask, like, okay, is that true? Maybe this person's metabolism is just very different, and they're telling me, just eat steak and potatoes, and I can get a 6-pack, and then I'm doing, and it's like, oh, it's not working for me, and it's all, you just don't know, because everything is individual. But there are grains of truth in everything, and again, it goes back to what we were saying earlier. Just be honest with yourself.
Yeah.
If you believe you're that lucky, then I guess go for it. But for the rest of us, I guess we're going to try to take more of a fundamental approach to it, and we're going to try to grow financially.
No, I love that. I really wanted to kind of touch on that simply because it's everywhere we see, right?
Yeah.
And I love how, like, naturally everything you've said just came full circle, really, right? Because especially when you just touched on, like, the whole weight loss, like these sort of themes and get rich quick and or lose weight quick and or get successful quick type of thing is, it's gimmicky, right? And it is that flash and drama, so it catches your attention.
It's a show.
But ultimately, similar to just consistency, discipline, if it is, independent from finance, if it's health you're seeking, you don't gain that immediately,
of course.
Right? So I actually love that kind of parallel comparison, so that that it's not going to be overnight, right? And regardless, I want sort of like the takeaway key thing is whatever gets you excited, gets you interested about your own finances, that should be the key.
Yeah, that's it. We'll go with that.
Get you questioning, what's my standing? Yeah. How am I doing? Yeah. What does wealth look like to me?
Yeah.
And then get brutally honest and start.
Yeah, because that's what we notice with the younger generation today. They're more informed. I mean, their information is more readily available.
Yeah.
You don't have to, get the newspaper and look at the tickers from the day before. And,
I know,
the
print.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the way it was. And, some of the audience may not even know what a newspaper is. Like, there's just that reality. But now, finding the younger generation is much more informed, much more interested. And then it's about, okay, let me shape your views on what this actually means and how this is going to play into, your own world and how this is going to play into your decisions. And, now when you take that job, you're not only looking at salary, you're looking at the benefits, you're looking if there's a group savings plan, you're looking if there's a stock option plan. Like, they're just more in the know. And, that you would think that makes my job more difficult, but it actually makes it a lot easier, because now, when you're speaking to some young professionals, like, you're having a more informed discussion versus having to, teach someone about budgeting per se, right? Which, again, budgeting is extremely important, but there's less time spent on that and more about, okay, well, how are we actually going to make this money work for you? And, especially being in Canada, like, tax is the big thing. And the higher the income you earn, the more that tax has to become that number one priority.
Yeah.
And if we're successful in our tax planning, then our overall net worth is going to exponentially grow, and we're going to be financially successful.
Absolutely. So we're almost there. I would just say, in this current information availability state, what would you as an advisor tell the younger and or just constituents and audiences everywhere? How do you deal with that paralyzing almost fear of too much information, right? Like, if you had a client that was just like, I'm seeing all of this, similar to the noise of the now, but also just there's so much advice coming in. How do you?
Yeah, well, that's what I'd say. It's funny that that's actually what allows us to be successful with our clients, because, for many individuals, there is too much information. And they realize that I don't even know where to go with this, because I was listening to this, it said to do A, then actually listening to this, it said to do B. My mom's telling me to do C. My uncle said he did D. Like, now there's just too much information that it actually paralyzes them.
Yeah.
And so it makes the role of the advisor that much more important, because we're able to actually walk them through the steps of execution, because ultimately it's actually executing. As mentioned before, like opening that account and making that purchase of the investment for most individuals ends up being like a paralyzing thing. They don't actually want to, do it because of, the per se or the perceived risks involved. And so now in the information age, it just means that a qualified professional who can cut through the noise and give you the actuality and show you the nuts and bolts as to why A, B, or C works or doesn't work, you find that we become that much more, relevant. And so, as AI becomes more and more a part of our world, like absolutely as an advisor, like we utilize AI as a tool as well. But it doesn't mean that the Tesla robot is going to wake up and make us breakfast. Like it doesn't mean it's going to wake up and, design a financial plan for us and keep us on track. And maybe it will. Maybe I'll be obsolete in a few years. Who knows, right, in that sense. But as it stands now, for many individuals, sort of that human relationship of having someone to coach and guide them throughout their goals. For most people, they find that aspect of it comfortable, because there is a lot of software out there that we can just utilize, that I can plug in my information and say, okay, what do I do? And then we as individuals are wondering, is that actually right? Because that may be just the definition. Like ChatGPT says I should do this, but how do I actually define it? And like in real life examples, like many times today, our clients will come to us and say, my nephew or niece showed me this from ChatGPT, or, my son or daughter showed me this from ChatGPT, or should I be doing it? And many times we'll find there's just so many holes and context within it, because, the way that AI works, if I'm not asking the right questions, then I'm not going to get the right answer.
Right.
And many times as the advisor, our role in a good advisor, and this I think is what's separating the good advisor from those that are just sort of cruise control, is we're ensuring that we're asking the right questions so that enough context is built in your plan, and so that you can be successful.
No, I appreciate you touching on something so, I would say, ever evolving and relevant right now, right? Like so many of our constituents in, I would say, corporate Canada and peripheral are thinking about like, how is AI and technology going to change how we invest, how we work, how we look at money and stuff
Absolutely.
like that. So I really like that you talked about a good advisor. So it comes down to that well-established sort of insight that comes with being able to decipher, even if the information surface is relevant to your portfolio, right? Because very often at surface level, it reads fine, right? But how does it integrate with your...
You have to tailor it to yourself.
Yeah.
And that's the key. With financial planning, it has to be tailored. And, when you go back to AI, I mean, all of us are, whether you're a drywaller or you lay tiles, like I just saw a video where there was a robot that was sort of laying tiles, and it was perfectly done in an instant. And so if you're, someone working in the trades, you're also thinking about AI. If you're a realtor, you're thinking, okay, is AI going to... So we're all thinking about it in that way. But we have to understand, okay, how can we utilize it as a tool versus fighting against it, or thinking that we're going to be replaced? Because if it can replace you, that means that maybe what you're doing is not as valuable. And so you have to, relook at your process and look at how, when I look at myself and my team, like we're always looking at, okay, how are we adding value for our clients? Like that's ultimately the question. Are we adding value? How are we adding value? And that answer is going to change every single year, every single quarter, whatever the case may be. But we have to ensure that we're continually adding value, because if we're not, then we should be replaced. That's just the reality of it.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I mean, it's really no different than your portfolio, right?
Yeah,
like
of
how
course.
are you constantly contributing to it as a part of your bills and your expenses, like you have said earlier, when you're investing in yourself and everything. So last question.
No, for sure. We're having fun. Keep going.
What would Daniel today
Yeah.
tell Daniel, who is 20 years old? And if you could go back, what would you tell him?
That's a great question. And funny enough, I would tell myself a lot of the things that I've said today.
Yeah? Just start.
In terms of just start.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, be more diligent with saving.
Okay.
Be a better saver. I happened to come into a self-employed career, and so you had to look at your cash flow and your, money management in a different way.
Yeah.
And, obviously as a, financial planner, I believed in saving in that sense.
Right.
But I think I'd still look back and say, okay, whatever you were doing, just do more.
More, yeah.
Okay, because I'm sure if you ask me 20 years from now, what would you ask the 40-year-old Daniel? Like, what would you, and I think it'd be the same in that sense, where it's just like, do more, right? Be more focused on the goals, do more, find a way to put more money away, ignore the noise that's out there. That's just in this moment.
Yeah.
You're going to, like, that's the thing with, markets and economics, is there is no calm water time. Like, we're just one crisis to another.
Right.
And every single time we tell ourselves, well, no, this time is different, and that's sort of the running joke when we're going through this, recent tariff debacle. And it's like, no, this time is different. And it's like, yeah, every time is different.
Right.
And we're always going to tell ourselves this time is different.
Yeah.
But you have to realize what we're doing is we're just managing one crisis to the other, one crisis to the other. And through that, markets will be resilient. Good companies are always going to rise to the top. Individuals who are managing their money appropriately are going to come out, sort of on the better side.
Yeah.
And so, just stay focused on what you can control. You can't control all these other things. Just stay focused on what you can control, and you'll build something that is great. And so I think I would hope that 20 years from now, when I'm looking back as well, I can be proud of, what we're doing, what myself and my team are doing.
Yeah.
And so that's what I tell the 20-year-old Dan. Just do what you're doing. You'll be proud of it when you kind of look at it.
I love that. So I think, my gosh, my mind is just working on overdrive there's so much I have to sit with what Daniel had said. But if I can summarize a few quick things, start.
Yeah.
There's never the right time. And to be honest, like you'll hear that, right? Like I feel like it's so simple, and yet we don't apply it because you're right. Like we're all so reserved and sometimes maybe it's habitual Canadian behavior, right? Like we're just so risk averse and all of that. But just start and be disciplined. Start anywhere. Start with $5, $10, but make sure it comes out of your budget. It becomes like paying yourself, right? Like paying a bill. Call it like Bill Daniel, Bill Elaine.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then also just, I think from this conversation, I would say find a good trusted source. A good advisor, like a good doctor. Like it's okay to try them out, right? But get to a point where you are able to seek that higher level sort of advice and make sure that I think, with everything Daniel said today, a good advisor is in touch with everything that is relevant with movement, and he's cognizant of changing of technology in the market. So, be informed, weed out the noise, stay with what you can control, and just start.
Yeah,
So,
and make sure it's personalized. I think that's the key. Make sure it's personalized. Like again, I know we're trying to wrap up. I just keep talking here.
No.
But, as an advisor, like I look at it more in a sense of I need to be able to be invited to your wedding or, one of the family members' funerals or something like that. Like I need to be that much a part of your team and part of what you're doing because that's going to speak to the advice.
Yeah.
I think the most successful advisor-client relationships are those where I truly understand you, and I understand you that much that you've brought me into your, sort of personal circle, and that's then going to speak to why we have that successful relationship.
Yeah.
I need to be doing my job, and as you said, keeping up with technology, keeping top of changes, understanding tax law changes, understanding how that's going to impact you, and I just need to ensure that I'm along the ride with you. And I see how life is developing and life is changing, and I understand the things that are truly important to you, because if I do, then I can give you the best advice.
Yeah.
Right? And if we can give the best advice, that's going to allow you to, achieve your personal goals. So for, the younger individuals, you'll start with an advisor today, and you always have to look at it like this is the advisor that I'm going to grow with.
Yeah. No, I love that. Be a part of your full stack team.
Absolutely.
Find a good doctor, find a good advisor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thank you, Daniel, and thanks for the
Thank
conversation. And again, stay tuned. We have more podcasts and conversations with CAUFP coming to you. But thanks for joining us, and remember to subscribe and like and share.